If I were to pick the most important card of the last decade of Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's hands down Ash Blossom, and she wasn't released until 7 years ago. In fact, it's so obvious the number 2 most important card is just the alt art of Ash, and third place is Called by the Grave just because it can negate Ash. But how did a monster that is pretty much never summoned to the board become the singular strongest card of modern play? And should we consider banning it in the TCG? Why only the TCG? Because in Master Duel and OCG, they have the stupid Earth Insect, and as long as that tumor is in the game, any card that stops it might as well be a blessing from God. Funnily enough, on release, Ash Blossom wasn't super popular. Let's take you back to an ancient time. 2017, oh god, I'm old. A little known deck called Zodiac was sort of tearing up the entire format. It had infinite consistency, could go +5, and was generally the only thing anyone could play at the time. Thankfully, in 2024, we don't have to worry about a tier 0 deck gaining a million advantage. But back then, we were playing cards like Droll and Lockbird, Ghost Ogre, and the singular copy of Max C. People didn't think a single search negation would be worth. Hell, Droll stops all cards from being added to hand. How much would a single search be? But that was until people realized, hey wait, there's actually more text on the card. Because it doesn't just stop at a search, it can stop a single mill from deck or a summon from deck. And during this time, there was a card called Zodiac Barrage that essentially gave you extension to do the Zodiac combo all over again. Not this combo, this combo. And while its applications are obviously more impactful than just against Zodiac, it immediately showed the Yu-Gi-Oh! Audience after a month or two just how insane the card was. The card soon spiked to like $70 at its peak, and at that time that was considered unreasonable for a singular staple. But the demand was real. From that point forward to the modern game, you could count on one hand how many formats where Ash wasn't an immediate 3 of no questions asked. The card pretty much hit every singular archetype in some way or another. Combo, control, stun, FTK. All of these decks had to search or draw or summon something to win the game. In fact, as Yu-Gi-Oh! Got infinitely faster and faster in the Link era, Ash began to be able to hit a deck in like 8 different places. Now every main deck monster and archetypal spell card was a searcher or extender, so you had to learn which cards were worth using your singular Ash on. And OCG players adopted Ash immediately as it was the only card of its time to be able to do anything about Max C. By next year, we had banned it in America. Thank God. But herein lies the problem. This card in the TCG is the only card that has been this insanely popular from release until now. 7 years of complete meta dominance is not something we see in a game as power creepy as Yu-Gi-Oh! Don't get me wrong, we have much older cards that absolutely do see competitive play even now, but typically they are played for a specific format. We aren't seeing Book of Moon right now, but just a few months ago, it was arguably the best going second staple of the format. Effect Veiler is popular right now, but most people only have space for just Imperm and other non-engine for most of the other formats. Personally, I can't wait for No Material to be the best hand trap, just you wait boys. But Ash and only Ash is played in every topping deck all of the time. In fact, at this point, modern decks are now setting cards from deck more than adding them to play around Ash Blossom. The card is so all-consuming in Yu-Gi-Oh!'s design principle that they need to circumvent it like this in order to make cards like Diabellstar as strong as they are. I think when a card that's 7 years old is still warping design space, we need to take a step back and reconsider why this big four-headed fuck is still playable. Oh, and if you're enjoying the video so far, please consider liking and subscribing. We are on the path to 4K subs. Thank you to each and every one of you. Now back to the video. I think there's a legit argument to consider banning Ash Blossom from the TCG. Now just because I think there is some merit, it doesn't mean I inherently agree. I just want to clear that up. So let's look at the pros and cons of taking this ghost girl to the grave. Pro number 1. we now dedicate the space to more targeted interaction. Just saying no to your opponent can be a bit boring, but if we teched in, I don't know, a card like Ghost Ogre instead, we can potentially interrupt our opponent in plays in a more dynamic manner. Maybe we can print a stronger hand trap that is more niche. Con number 1, we would have to ban like a ton of other cards alongside it. It's no secret that Konami uses Ash as a sort of floodgate, no relation to actual Yu-Gi-Oh! Floodgates, but like literal floodgates, to hold back and restrain the power of most of the modern combo decks. Most decks are built these days with the idea that they might be able to end on something if they have to get hand trapped once or twice, especially Ash Blossom, unless you're playing branded. But real talk, that deck would probably get very out of hand without Ash Blossom in the format. There's probably a ton of other fragile BS that would have to get hit because Ash does sort of filter that kind of garbage out of the formats. Pro 2. We can now ban a ton of other cards. I think modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Having to rely on drawing a hand trap or two, or one insane board breaker if you want a chance going second, isn't the best way to make a card game. Right now, with all of Yu-Gi-Oh!'s flaws, they culminate into a game where going first matters so much. No other card game is like this, where it matters as much as it does in Yu-Gi-Oh! This is a topic that I covered in my last video, but with generic boss monsters and the general speed of the game, we have to do something. And I think if we have to put our foot down at some point, now is the time to do so. I know it won't be fun, but I think there's some potential in slowing down the game just a bit, instead of having the game be less reliant on either, I am now going to full combo you to death, or my opponent opened 2 hand traps so I couldn't end on anything, and now they've summoned access code RIP Bozo. Con 2, we lose the only generic tool against control and stun decks. Ash Blossom is the only generic card that checks cards like Big Welcome, Sanguine, or any other evil trap deck that on resolution gets their guy and 40 other stupid cards alongside it. Running cards like Featherstorm or Cosmic Cyclone in the main is always a bit of a risk, as a lot of the time, they don't do too much against a majority of the meta decks. Kashtira or Unchained are not going to care if you Feather Duster them, but Labyrinth will. As a result, trap decks that will use the surprise factor to catch players off guard will flourish, cause Ash was sort of the shield against that. Now, how much do we really like trap decks is a good point and a topic for another time, but it's something to keep in mind. And Pro 3. If we ban Ash Blossom, I don't have to come up with a Con 3, because I have nothing more for this. It's 2 in the morning. These are the pros and cons. If you have any more pros and cons, dear viewer watching this video, comment them below. I will pin the single best one, but it is very late at night. I need to edit this still. So what do I personally think what should happen to Ash Blossom? Now, this might be a hot take here, but I'm not 100% convinced that a card that is played in most decks inherently has to be broken. I think there will always be some generic staple that is going to be able to hit most decks. It's been that way for years, and in the future it will continue to do so. However, with Ash, I would consider secret option 3, Errata. The potential errata I would put on Ash is you can only activate it if you control at max 1 monster. I think hand traps as strong as Ash Blossom going first after setting up an insane board is just unfair. It's bad enough I had to droplet half my hand away just to stand a chance in this game, but now I lose to the Ash alongside it. Nah, that sucks. This would still make the card very meta, but now it wouldn't be so automatically good. You would essentially be taking a gamble every time you run it versus running more niche hand traps that are active all the time. Now, why 1 monster max, not no monsters? Well, I want to keep Ash available for those decks that like to play hand trap control. Heat, Soul, Zodiac. I think it's one of the last few original Yu-Gi-Oh! Only style of decks we get to see, and I want to keep it alive for this potential Ash errata. I think this is the most fair compromise for a card as strong as Ash Blossom to continue to exist in Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, this is probably one of my wilder takes. I'm sure people who play Master Duel or OCG would not want Ash to be weakened, as now it doesn't stop your opponent's Max C as consistently. Well, guess what, buddy? The problem card is not Ash Blossom. I'll let you figure out what needs to be banned immediately. But I think the generic cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Have been weighing down on the game as a whole, and I'm going to continue to make videos pointing it out. And I want to thank you all who enjoy this type of content for watching. Please like and subscribe. This is BreadBoyWeeb signing out.